Has the reign of the Iron Queen just begun? We're talking the Invincible Iron Man number 8 today, as well as showing off a real ultimate comic from my collection, only on the Newest Mutants. The fall of X event has been huge in the Marvel Universe, and it's not just affecting our mutant friends, it's hitting everyone. That includes the now penniless Tony Stark. But before we dive into this issue, let's first take a look at this cover. This is a great looking cover of a Stark Sentinel just utterly destroying Tony. Cale New did an outstanding job. And I always love Iron Man covers. Here's a better picture right here. You can see it. Let's take a look and enjoy it. You can see how desperate Tony is in this situation, effectively facing off with a demon of his own design. Let's get to the tail of the tape, as they say. We're going to start with Jerry Duggan, our writer. We have Juan Frigeri, our artist. Brian Valenza, our colorist. We have VC's Joe Caramagna, letterer. And as always, our editor-in-chief, the illustrious C.B. Cebulski. Our story starts off before the Hellfire Gala. We have Tony Stark, no longer a billionaire, sitting in the office of one Jennifer the She-Hulk Walters, getting legal advice, as you would from a lawyer, as he calls her his Hulk lawyer. He's musing, though, in his thoughts about what a bad day that was. He's very upset that his Iron Man tech has been appropriated and used in the mutant hunting Sentinels. Meanwhile, Tony is asking Jennifer, let's get the war machine, James Rhodey, out of jail. She says the wheels of justice turn slowly. But she also has some more bad news, and she's advising Tony on his Iron Man tech, which now belongs to a character known as Fei Long. And that advice is, he's got to give it up. But first, who is Fei Long? It's time to learn, mutants. Let's get our learning caps on. Fei Long first appeared in X-Men #1, Volume 6 from 2021. Born Kelvin Hang, Fei Long is a genius in the Marvel Universe, having graduated MIT at the age of 13. Fei Long was turned against mutants when his lifelong dream of claiming and terraforming Mars for humanity was crumbled after the mutants of Krakoa terraformed Mars first and turned it into Arakko. So with his money and time wasted, including transforming his own body to survive on Mars, Fei Long decided to just hate mutants and work towards their destruction. Now the current owner of Stark Unlimited and Iron Man technology, he has teamed up with Orcus and was actually a part of the plot at the mutant massacre in Krakoa, using Sentinels integrated with Iron Man tech to attack the mutant nation. She-Hulk tells Tony he needs to surrender all the Iron Man tech to Fei Long, and so we cut to Tony now packing a crate with an Iron Man suit, presumably his last Iron Man suit. And as he's doing so, he does get an emergency call from the Avengers showing an attack on DC by Captain Krakoa. Tony is like, well, one last ride. So he gets in that Iron Man suit and flies. As he's flying to Washington, D.C., Tony gets a notice that there are already Avengers en route to D.C., and then simultaneously he gets a call from Captain America that there is another emergency at the Brooklyn Bridge. Stark is there in 70 seconds. Tony arrives at the Brooklyn Bridge, and Rogue and Captain America are already there. The three of them have this quick discussion about Captain Krakoa, and the three of them quickly agree that it isn't Cyclops. But who is Captain Krakoa? Captain Krakoa, well, at least the suit, first appeared in X-Men #6, Volume 6 in 2022. It was designed by the Mutant Forge, and it was designed for mutants that don't necessarily have, combat-based abilities to be able to fight in combat. It was originally worn by Cyclops after his death, but it is currently unknown who has worn the suit to this terrorist attack in DC. posing as Captain Krakoa. And before we continue with my review of this comic, I have a question for you folks watching or listening at home. Do you like these multi-series crossover events? Or do you prefer like one book the way they had Secret Wars or Civil War, where you can follow this main story without having to buy lots of crossover issues? You know, let me know in the comments. I'm really interested to hear what you have to say. And while you're there, throw me a like and a follow, and we'll be all good. And now, back to the mutants. With the revelation that Captain Krakoa is probably a false flag, Iron Man, Rogue, and Captain America make their way to DC. And if you want to know what happened in DC, you gotta check out Uncanny Avengers #1, which is actually going to be the issue we cover next time. And so, fast forward, we cut back to Tony in New York City. All of the events of the Hellfire Gala and of Washington, D.C. have already taken place at this point. Tony, though, sees a Stark Sentinel attacking an office building, and of course he's curious what's going on as it's going after a, quote, high-value mutant. That mutant is actually the White Queen, Emma Frost. She just happens to be with a friend of ours, the Kingpin. They're both still wearing their gala outfits. Stark, not being one to wait, takes out the Sentinel and confronts Frost and Fisk. This scene actually ties back to our episode on Immortal X-Men 14, where Fisk has been revealed to be the new White King, and this is where he's been signing the documents to purchase the Hellfire Club. So we get to see that crossover in action. X, right? X. Reasonably so. Stark is a little suspicious and wonders why she's there with Wilson Fisk after the attacks. Emma, of course, she's having none of it and wonders why Stark's Sentinels killed a lot of mutants at the gala and asks how Stark is going to make amends. It's at this point another Sentinel attacks, knocking Tony out of the building and into the street, where he lands on a taco truck and then is subsequently stepped on by a Sentinel. Kingpin's feeling on the subject is that Emma should use Stark's pain to her gain, but she refuses to leave, whereas the Kingpin kind of just bounces out of the scene. We cut now to Fei Long, who is watching this whole thing play out on a monitor through the Sentinel's eyes. Frost threatens him via the Sentinel and says, he's bitten off more than he can chew, threatening all of mutantdom. Fei Long repeats the Orcus talking points and propaganda about how it was actually the mutants who did everything, attacking diplomats and using their medicines to poison humans. Frost goes into her diamond form and offers Fei Long an ultimatum: retreat, pay restitution, pay restitution, or I'll see you dead under my heel. Okay, who can resist an offer of being stepped on by Emma Frost? Well, apparently Fei Long. What a loser. He tells the Sentinels to kill them both. Stark and Frost fight off the Sentinels, and Stark picks Emma up in his Iron Man suit and takes her away and drops her at a subway station. Frost telepathically tells Tony, she's gonna find the other X-Men. Tony returns to where the Sentinels were fighting and oddly can't find them when somehow they sneak up on him and they come together, check out this picture, and crush him in a double punch attack. It's pretty sick. Emma can sense this, of course, and she races back to Tony, who is unconscious, in a show of unparalleled compassion for another, for a human being. She's generally worried about him, though, and using her telepathic powers, she gets into his head, trying to wake him up. Mentally, she finds him stuck inside of his mind, believing he's gonna die. He's in a very dark place. She insists he won't die, though, after all he's been through, and decides to just take over, and she takes control of his body and gets him out of danger. She remarks as she's inside Tony that the Iron Man suit feels like an Iron Maiden, and she wouldn't want to live in that thing. We call that foreshadowing. This works as a great distraction, as the Sentinels are in fact distracted, and they now go after Emma instead. At this point, Tony is able to control his faculties again and thanks Emma for coming back to save him, just as a sentinel grasps her in its hands and places a mutant inhibitor collar on Emma, effectively taking her out of this fight, removing her powers. Stark sheds his Iron Man suit, however, at this point, and surrenders to Fei Long to save Emma's life. Fei Long is like, hey, I want both of them arrested for interrogation. Stark has other plans, and he sets his armor to rescue mode. The armor then snaps together around Emma Frost and takes her away, much to the chagrin of Fei Long. He's a little mad he wanted her dead or alive. Tony also says Fei Long wants him dead, and then he calls his bluff. He's like, hey, do you want to kill an Avenger in the streets? Because if you do, you'll be dead by the morning. And that's the book. So let's get right into my thoughts. This is the first Iron Man book I've read probably since Marvel's Civil War. It was good. I like when Tony's not a billionaire. I like that a lot. Sadly, I do think Marvel will always make excuses for Tony and will make him look like a very good guy when he gets his billionaire status back, sustaining the myth of the self-made man. In comic books, this fantasy is possible. In reality, it is, of course, just a fantasy. But I digress. This was a decent book, and Tony showed some compassion for Emma, and in turn, Emma showed compassion for him. Emma Frost, over the years, has been a really great character, and her development has been wonderful. Starting as simply the evil White Queen, she's now evolved into this extremely complex and layered character. I really, really love her now in comics. She's awesome. As to the question I posed at the beginning of the show, has the reign of the Iron Queen begun? I don't know. Actually, I do know. I know some spoilers, but it was a little clickbaity of me to ask that, but I would love to speculate on what would happen if Emma Frost, the White Queen, fully in charge of a Stark Iron Person suit. What would she be like? She would be unstoppable. With her telepathic abilities and the fighting prowess of Stark tech, she would be an extremely formidable opponent for just about anyone in a 1v1 situation. And if her suit was destroyed for whatever reason, she just goes diamond form and becomes pretty indestructible. This is something I would love to see. But also, I like fan service and overpowered characters, so hey, that's just me. The real crux of this story, though, is Fei Long versus Tony Stark. A face-off is inevitable, but they're going to have to build it up for some time. Marvel really loves to let their stories cook, and I'll be covering Invincible Iron Man up through the Fall of X content, but I will probably keep reading this book until Tony and Fei Long have their decisive battle. Marvel art has been pretty great since I've hopped back in, and Frigeri did a great job, on this issue. And with that segue, I want to recognize my 3 favorite panels. So, in case I cannot find these online when I edit this video, we're going to start with number 3, and I call it I Surrender. You can see it down here. Look at that. There's Tony Stark. It's okay. Yeah, I like it. Take a quick look. Enjoy. In this moment, Tony is shedding his Iron Man armor in a true moment of fragility. He surrenders in order to save Emma Frost. I really like how the Iron Man armor is sort of like, crumbling, peeling off of Tony, and he is somewhat bowed in submission, his hand outstretched as if to say, enough, you've won. It's a small panel, but very meaningful, and I feel it is the climax of this story. So in the second image, we can see inside of Tony's mind, and it's a really dark place. And as you can see right here, take a look. As you can see, it's cold and snowing, and Tony says he is dying. He's also surrounded by liquor bottles, and we know what that means in terms of Tony Stark. This is where Emma had to go mentally to find him inside his head, right? He's unconscious. So despite how he's acting on the outside, we actually see where Tony's head is at. he's not in a good place right now. And here is the number one panel for me, right here. Right there. Check it out. Nice, nice. Here's a digital one. This is a great action panel. It's showing two Sentinels working together to smash Tony Stark like a sandwich in your back pocket when you sit down on the bus. I know that it sounds extremely specific, but I just made it up as I wrote it down. Still, I love this DBZ-esque pose here and the little ripple effect of that smash. Tony is in extreme danger, and this is what triggers Emma to return and save him. These two are really good together. I like it. I ship it. But you might already know what happens in the future. Who knows? And now it's time for my favorite part of this episode, where I show off a comic, or at least in this case, two comics from my collection. As promised, we have from the Ultimate Universe, Ultimate X-Men number 42. It is a David Finch cover with Storm, but it's not the cover that we're concerned about. Is the final panel. And in this final panel, we have the first Ultimate X-Men appearance of Emma Frost. If you've been watching this show, though, for a while, you already know that I've shown this particular issue, right? That is Uncanny X-Men number 129. That's two Emma Frost first appearances. Nice. Certainly one of my favorite characters, especially since the new X-Men run from the 2000s. On the next issue of the newest Mutants, we will be talking about Uncanny Avengers number 1. As always, Excelsior.